trickling in here. We're going to be getting started with our Manufacturing Hardware Accelerator info session in just a minute or two. We're going to give it a second for people to trickle in, but welcome as we're getting ready to go here. Maya, is my screen sharing correctly? It's black on my end and I'm not sure.
It is black. I cannot see it.
Give me a second, then I might need to download them because they don't appear to be working on the browser. All right. For those of you just trickling in, welcome. We're going to get started in just a moment here. Waiting for just a few more to trickle in before we get started. And for me to get these slides working. It's not everything right now. So. All right. Okay. Looks like we've got technical difficulties sorted out now. Welcome, everyone. So this is our first info session for our Manufacturing Hardware Accelerator for spring of 2025. Looking forward to running you all through some of the details today and talking a little bit about the program, how it operates, what to look for, things to think about if you are considering applying. Ken, do you want to start off with any details of what we do here at Rev and why hardware?
Sure, thank you. Hey, everybody, I'm Ken Rother. I'm the director at Rev and the founding director of our hardware programs. So we've been doing hardware programs here for 10 years. And our belief is that our belief is there's been a renaissance, I think everyone agrees, in hardware entrepreneurship. And we're trying to bring some of the discipline that has, sort of taken hold in the software industry to the hardware world. So things like lean startup and customer discovery and iterative design and involving the customer. And our programs, which now span everywhere from early stage prototyping to getting to design freeze, and then this program, which gets you from the design freeze into readiness for manufacturing, all of these kind of programs build up on that kind of ethos of trying to work in a very iterative fashion. Although once we talk about manufacturing, things tend to not be so iterative anymore, and it's more about getting the final touches done. So you're ready to duplicate. So we've been doing this program for a few years now, helping people get ready, getting them familiar with the wording and the sort of flow of what it takes to get into manufacturing. Many of the people we work with, probably you are these people, really good at prototyping, really good at sort of that first, instance of taking a user requirement and building something around it. And what we know is it's a very, very different skill set in order to get to manufacturing. It's a different knowledge base, and we're very focused on helping you get to that point of fluency so you can move through the manufacturing ecosystem.
All right, thanks, Ken. So some things we're going to go through today on the details of how this program works, things you should know. We're first going to talk a little bit about our team and philosophy. So a little bit of an expansion on the notes Ken just made about what we do here at Rev, why we do it, how we operate, and really our focus for all of the hardware programs that we offer. Then we're going to run through program overview, so what the expectations are, how the program operates and the calendar for the program. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up talking about the resources and the options for the program. There's a couple of different models that we have of how you could engage with the Manufacturing Hardware Accelerator. So as Ken mentioned, we've been doing hardware programs for a handful of years now. Our Manufacturing Accelerator is new. A prototyping accelerator has been running for the last 15 years, 2015, 10 years, 10 years, 2015. And our Manufacturing Accelerator has been going for about 4 years now. So we're a mix of different folks here. We've got hardware engineers, Cornell faculty and students all mingled throughout our ecosystem. We have experienced entrepreneurs and technical mentors as well. So good collection of folks here to support hardware in all ways, shapes, and forms. I'm going to let Ken intro himself.
So, hi again, everybody. I'm Ken Rother. I'm the director at Rev and founding director of our hardware programs. I teach entrepreneurship up at the business school at Cornell, as well as part of the I-Core teaching team. I'm a software guy from a long time ago. I've twice built companies and exited those to publicly traded US companies. So I've sort of been on the entrepreneur side of the table, building companies, raising money, and now spend the last dozen years spending all my time working with startups.
All right. My name's Deanna Coker. I'm the associate director of our programs. I've been here for 2.5 years now. My background is mostly mechanical engineering, but I've also worked in industrial design. I'm really passionate about product and people. So I love working with startups and innovators because there's always that connection to the end customer, which is really important to me. Generally industry agnostic here. As I said, I've been with Rev for the last 2.5 years now. So that's rolled off on me a little bit, but my personal passions are usually in consumer electronics and robotics. I run the technical team here, so if you do engage with us on technical advising or in any way with our engineering team, I'm the main contact for that. Lindsay?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Agliello. I'm a product development engineer here at Rev. I've been at Rev since our prototyping accelerator in the summer, and we're in our manufacturing accelerator right now, and I'm having a great time learning about product development and all things product development. So excited to work with everyone.
Sydney?
Okay. Yeah, I just started here at Korea and I'll be the program coordinator on this accelerator. You'll be working with me to answer any questions about application process, the schedule, resources, and setting up mentor meetings. And I'm excited to work with y'all.
All right, and Jen couldn't be with us today, but Jen runs our food and ag program. So if you are an ag tech team in any way, shape, or form, if you happen to engage with food and ag, Jen is a great resource for you. She runs all of our programs here at Rev and has a wealth of knowledge in the space, as well as connections to all of those other programs, including our Grow New York competition, which is coming up in just a few weeks now. So our philosophy across the board with our programs, as Ken mentioned, is simultaneous development of business and technology. So across any of our programs, if you've heard of our programs before, that's what we're pushing, is not just developing a business model without checking that the tech is actually feasible or is going to match the price point, and not just developing the tech without connecting to a customer, but really pushing both at once. So we practice lean startup, very involved with the customer at different stages, and you interact with the customer in different ways at those stages, but always interacting with the customer and staying on top of your customer needs. We're very focused on surrounding you with support. So we're going to talk about some different ways that support executes in these programs, but very focused on trying to connect you to the things that you need if it's not us helping you find the other resources or supporting you wherever you go. And constantly validating that business model, product, tech. So making sure that you're iterating and that you're investing your money in something that's going to go somewhere. So really staying focused on that and having regular touch points. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the program now. What is our manufacturing accelerator? What are we talking about? What's kind of included in that package or in that framing? So generally, we talk a little bit about the product development process, and when we talk about manufacturing, we like to highlight it in light of the other programs that we offer and in terms of the general development pipeline. So over here on the right here, we have our 3 different hardware accelerators. We have prototyping, protofactoring, and manufacturing. So the goal here is that they obviously all piece together very nicely. And if you are coming from within one of our protofactoring programs, or you came from one of our prototyping programs, then we'll talk a little bit about how manufacturing sits relative to those because they are all streamlined together. If you're coming from outside of our programs, then we want to try and get you to the right point and help you understand what manufacturing is here and where it picks up. So on the technical side, we're talking about either late in the engineering validation stage. So that means that you have an engineering prototype, something that you've gone through at least a little bit of design for manufacturing. You maybe know what manufacturing processes you're planning to use. You've done a pilot test maybe with customers to make sure that you design something that they actually like, they can use, has the right features. And on the business side, you've got some funding coming in, hopefully a lot more coming as you get to the manufacturing stage. You might have a pre-sales campaign going, maybe not quite yet, but you've had those touch points with customers where they've interacted with the product. You've confirmed your customer segment, your value proposition, more the right-hand side of the business model canvas. You're feeling pretty confident about right now. So what does that mean for this program? So in our protofactoring program, if you're participating in that, we are focused on getting you to pilot test with customers. You've taken your product out, you've gotten feedback on it, and you're integrating that feedback. For manufacturing, our program goal here is to get you to successfully complete your first short production run. That's the perfect goal if everything happens to line up. That doesn't mean that it necessarily has to happen, but that's kind of the slotting of the program is that you're coming in with an engineering prototype and you're getting ready for your first short production run in the next year. So on the business side, we're focusing on validating the left-hand side of the business model canvas. That includes your key partners, costs and revenues, and key activities. So you're working through those activities. Those tend to be what you get to last on the business model canvas as you're really finalizing details. On the product side, we're hoping to get you scaling and preparing to scale the launch. So you are selecting your contract manufacturers or your assemblers, you're getting your first production samples. Maybe you're doing those first beta tests. And I say that thinking of maybe 100 products out to customers, maybe it's 50, maybe it's more than that, but a full beta test that's actually a scalable product, or you're doing your initial sales. And then on the marketing sales revenue side, we are looking here to get you through your initial production costs. So you should have funding that will move you through that first manufacturing batch. Maybe you're doing your pre-sales campaigns to help with that funding and maybe closing on initial sales, securing letters of intent and more. So that's what we're generally aiming for with this program, especially in the first half. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the program is split up into a first half, which is content heavy, and then a second half, which is more of ongoing support. So is this the right program for you? Some things that you should have in place, or at least are very close to having in place. So you have either achieved design freeze, you've got that engineering prototype that you feel very confident about that you can lock down, or you're just a few weeks off. Maybe you're finalizing some different features, or you know that you have generally the prototype has all the core requirements, but maybe you've got a few tweaks to go, but you're pretty close to a full design freeze. You probably have and should have some low volume prototypes that at the very least demonstrate manufacturing intent. So this is not a brick of a 3D print. This is something that has been thoughtfully put together for assembly and has some intent behind what manufacturing processes would be used. So it is a true engineering prototype, but maybe using low volume production methods. You have evidence of product market fit. Now that can execute in a couple different ways, but you've done customer discovery. You've talked to the humans at the end of the pipeline. You have either paid or unpaid pilots. Paid pilots are fantastic at this point because you've also demonstrated that people are willing to pull out their credit card. Unpaid pilots also show that you've got some product market fit. People have used it and we're generally happy, ideally. And you've got funding. So if you've come into funding for this, that's also a good sign. You should have a funding strategy in place and you should have funding available to support at least some tooling. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, but you should imagine that you could advance some part of your product, whether that's your electronics are ready to scale or some of your plastics or some of the metal components. You want to have something that's in a place where you're ready to move it forward to higher volumes. It doesn't mean you have to have funding for everything. Some things you normally don't have if you're applying to this program, you're typically not already generating revenue. So you don't have production quality product out there. You maybe have done a few pre-sales. You could have done a few sales of low volume production. That's very possible, but not high volumes yet, at least not in a way that you're satisfied with. You usually don't have manufactured product, so low volume production methods are perfect for coming into this program. If you already are using a handful of different high volume production methods, you might be a little bit farther along for some of our content. And most likely you don't have a full team of engineers on board yet. You may be looking to grow your team as you have just come into funding and are now looking to scale, but typically you don't have that full team flushed out at this point. Very possible that you do, but typically you don't yet. The program is split into 4 different tracks, so we'll talk about those briefly, but they're generally aligned to your sector. This really just impacts the mentors that you will work with over the course of the program and helping us connect you with the right people and the right resources. But we have a ClimateTech track, an AgTech track, a MedTech track, and a classic track. Talk a little bit about those. So the ClimateTech track, again, is focused on decarbonizing. You want to be thinking about your carbon footprint. Your big picture here, if you're in the ClimateTech track, is that you are focused on sustainability. You have an interest in carbon reduction. This helps us connect you with any resources or other accelerators, funding opportunities that we might see. We will give you industry-specific mentorship. So we have business mentors in the climate sector that we will pair you with, and connections to other climate founders as well. The AgTech track, this is a funded track from the U.S. Economic Development Administration's University Centers program. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but we want to appreciate our sponsors and know that that's something that you would have as a part of joining the AgTech track, as to say you were in a funded program from the US EDA. If you are in AgTech, you could be working on equipment that is related to food. You could be working on anything related to farm. As long as it is a hardware product and not a food product itself, you could very well be AgTech focused. There's a lot of different things that fall into this. We've seen different founders who are looking at cutting down environmental impacts. Maybe there's a focus on food security or climate protection. We've seen a little bit of everything here. Cornell being a big ag school, we have a lot of resources in the AgTech track. So if you think you're in this space, I recommend that you would apply here. Our MedTech track is also funded by another EDA grant. This is the Build to Scale grant. It's in partnership with Weill Cornell, which is a med school down outside of New York City. So this is medical devices, generally speaking. I don't like to say that they have to be clinically tracked MedTech products, because we have had products that start as consumer products that are still health focused. We've had sleep tech, we've had MedTech, we've had a variety of different things that fall into this. So if you are working in the MedTech space, this is a great track for you to be in. And our classic track is kind of our catch-all for everything else hardware. So generally, we say software wrapped in plastic. Anything that has a physical component, whether or not it has electronics, we count as hardware. So it doesn't need to be electronic, doesn't need to have anything in particular, as long as it's got a physical element to it that is not food. Some previous classic track products we've had literally everything all over the map here, from sports tech to femtech, wearables. We've had different NGOs and social good type products that have come through. So a variety of different things fit into this category. And if you're not sure, this is a good starting point. When you're applying to tracks, I want to talk a little bit about this before we move on to the program, because it's helpful to understand what the tracks are and how we process the tracks. If you are interested in applying, apply to the track that you think is most appropriate. It does not have any impact on how we review your application. The tracks, like I said, are a way to connect you with the right people and the right resources. So if you apply to MedTech and we read your application and we say you're not actually MedTech, we can still accept you into the classic track, and whatever that looks like. So I don't want you to overthink what track you're in. apply to what you think is appropriate if you're planning to apply, and we will work with you to sort out the right details and get you connected to the right people. Okay, program calendar. So this is the important part for scheduling. All of our content is on Monday afternoons, 3 to 5 p.m. So if you are someone in the proto-factoring cohort right now, I know we have a few people on the call, exactly the same basic format, 3 to 5 p.m., 2 different sessions. There's a couple exceptions here for holidays and some in-person content where we've moved things around a little bit. All of those sessions that are on Monday afternoons, those are virtual. The biggest thing is to make sure you're going to be available at those times, regardless of what time zone you are in, since we are always offering those on East Coast time. We also have design reviews. So this is a little bit different than some of our other programs, but basically what you should expect is that you're going to have a report out, you're going to give some updates, and those are the last Wednesday of every month. We do have an in-person session for this program. So everything up to this point that I've talked about is virtual. You're going to have Zoom links, but we do have in-person sessions in May. So that's important because we're going to do some content and then we're going to go look at visit some contract manufacturers. So this is a great way to do a test run of when you go visit a facility, what are you looking for? What makes for a good facility, a good contract manufacturer, a good assembler, anything like that. So that's why we have those in-person sessions so that you get a chance to go see an actual manufacturer, assembler, et cetera, see what their facilities look like, and then you can gauge anyone that you're looking to work with kind of against that. That is the only in-person chunk of the program. So that is where you'll be expected to be in Ithaca, New York, and otherwise everything is on Zoom. After those in-person sessions in May, everything would be virtual. You would have mentorship support continued through the end of 2025. So this is a 12-month program. It kicks off in January, that January 13th date, that Monday. And then you would have continuing mentorship through December of 2025. That's what you should expect, but note that the content and the in-person requirement is in the front half of the month or the front half of the program, and then everything after is focused on you, giving you mentorship and support. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what all of that means and what that looks like. So program structure, like I said, virtual sessions Monday afternoon. These are content-focused sessions. So we're going to talk about the business model canvas. We're going to talk about setting up relationships with key partners and how to know if someone is a key partner. We'll talk about technical details. So if you're finalizing documentation, we're going to talk about reassessing your manufacturing readiness level. We'll go through and talk about how to evaluate contract manufacturers and so on. Then on those last Wednesdays of the month, you'll have those cohort design reviews. The entire cohort will be on those calls. You'll have mentors on those calls. We're going to break you out into groups and basically check for updates, see who's got what, give any feedback here and there as needed. So we'll talk about those in more detail as they come up in the actual program, but that's what you should expect from those Wednesday sessions. Bi-weekly meetings with mentors. So every 2 weeks, 30-minute check-ins, and a couple different options for that. But generally, you can expect that those meetings are all on Zoom. There's some technical and business mentorship available. There's 2 different program options that we're going to talk about. There's a development model and there's an advising model. Those are executed in 2 different ways. All of the content is the same. All of the items that I've just talked about in terms of the in-person requirement, the virtual requirements, those are identical across both program options. But there's some different things between the 2 depending on what you specifically need for your company. So in the advising model, I'm going to start over here on the right. You get everything in the main content. So that includes all the documentation templates and assessments. All of those are yours to take away, use them if needed and as needed. Then you'll have bi-weekly business mentor meetings. So you have a mentor who's an experienced entrepreneur who will check in with you twice a month, 30-minute meetings, all virtual. You have the option, as and if needed, of either bi-weekly or monthly technical meetings adding up to an hour maximum. So those are either 20-minute meetings twice a month, maybe a 45-minute meeting once a month, but you'll have the option to check in technical details if you have something that you really just want an opinion on, or some advice. We can talk through things like that. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail of what those might look like in just a few minutes. In the development model, you get some of these same resources, but the engineering is a little bit different. So the technical support is a little bit different in the development model. So you'll have bi-weekly business mentor meetings, same as in the advising model, but you'll have more regular engineering team meetings. So those will be 30 minutes once a week, and you'll get engineering support from our team here at Rev. That's usually about 10 hours a week, depending on what exactly is needed. We found with pacing that 10 hours a week is generally what startups need to get things moving and get them going in the right direction without needing to invest in paying a full-time engineer. If you are in the development model tier, you also have remote access to the Rev shop. Essentially, we are your hands in the shop. If you are in Ithaca, if you're based in Ithaca or the surrounding area, you can also get full access to Rev. The expectations are very similar, but we do like to call them out here because if you do get into the development model or the advising model, we have different expectations of how you communicate with us. So I'm going to start with the advising model again. You should have one main point of contact for business and technical mentors. This is helpful for consistency. It means that if we get on a call, there's no game of telephone that we're playing because so-and-so was on the call last week and now someone new is on the call this week and we've got to all go full circle. That's just inconvenient for everyone and not efficient. So you should have one main point of contact. You should be attending those content sessions, videos on. So we do have guest speakers and we do have breakouts. We expect you to be engaging with those content sessions. And then you should be continuing to engage with the business model canvas. So we're going to be focusing more on key partners, costs, activities, and resources. As I mentioned, that means a couple of different things, but essentially want you actively engaged, updating your business model. That can be customer discovery interviews, it can be networking, it can be a number of different things, but that's what you'll be focusing on and what we're expecting from you. Of course, you're also advancing the technical side of the product, but we're not calling that out as directly here because you might have a full team, you might be in a different development stage. But those are the core expectations in the advising model. In the development model, very similar. You should have one main point of contact to help us keep that consistency across meetings, attending sessions with your videos on. If there are documentation requests from my team, since we're working with you a little bit more directly here, then I expect that those are going to come back in a timely manner. So if you need to sign an NDA in order for us to have more of a conversation with a manufacturer, you will be holding yourself up. We need you to get that moving. And similarly, you're continuing to engage with the business model canvas. So if you're in the development model, you can't just sit and run with the tech. We need to make sure you're also validating that BMC. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what that means. So I have two examples, one for each model to talk about how to know which one makes sense for you. And we do put these together very thoughtfully as to what different startups need based on their team, based on their status. So this is exactly the criteria we're using to assess your entrance to the program over here on the left. So your product development. What is the status of your prototype and what's your time to market? Like I said, we're looking for that engineering prototype with some engineering validation testing. That's the ideal positioning. It's not the only positioning, but that's the ideal positioning for the program. Your beachhead market. So do you have a truly defined customer segment? Could you run us through an archetype? Tell us how to find that customer. You know what the value proposition is for that customer. We also consider coachability. So we want to make sure that you are regularly engaging with customers. You're going out and talking to people as well as coming and talking with our team. We want to make sure that we're going to have some productive conversations. Funding availability and timeline is a piece here. It is less heavily weighted in the advising model than it is in the development model. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but you do want to have funding available. We want to make sure you're going to make progress. And we also look at your team, your backgrounds, making sure you have not product market fit, but founder market fit. A strong example candidate for the advising model. People who fit best into this category usually have a slightly larger team. So you maybe have a four-person team, 2 full-time people, and maybe you have 2 students who are on the team. Could be from anywhere. You've got 2 students or 2 younger engineers. You have an engineering prototype. It's been pilot tested with customers. So your PRD, your product requirements are established. You are regularly engaging with your customers through customer discovery, focus groups, any number of different things, but you have those regular touch points. You have at least some funding available. And you are mostly looking for support on the technical side because you do have some engineers, but they could use some guidance. And so that's a really good fit for the advising model because you can work with our team to help give some guidance, maybe talk through strategy, review drawings or design concepts and help with fabrication methods or so on. But you really only need a few touch points, guidance for those engineering students, and then you don't need to hire a full-time person. And that's really the core piece there, is that you are looking just for guidance and to stay away from going away from that lean startup and having to hire a whole full team. You don't have the funding for that, so we can help you get by with the team that you have, essentially. The development model is slightly different in how we consider the applications. So generally the criteria is all the same, but we do more heavily weight a few things. So we do consider how many engineers that you have on your team because we want to avoid having too many cooks in the kitchen, essentially. If you have 3 mechanical engineers, I can tell you that Rev has a handful of mechanical engineers. We want to make sure that we have work that we can do that is meaningful for you. So if you have a team of engineers, you're more likely to be a fit in the advising model. And if you are lighter on the engineering side, you might be a stronger fit for development. Your launch timeline. So you should be looking to launch your product at least in low volumes over the course of the program. I have an example that I'll talk about over in a second as to what that might look like, but you should have an expectation that there will be launch in those 12 months, however that slots out. And then lastly, there is one new criteria here. It's product shop fit. So if you have a product that is heavily in, would be a good example of something that we've never played with. Very large industrial stuff. We tend not to interact with that too much because it's hard for us to prototype in the shop. So we do consider what the needs are of the project and making sure that A, we the people can work with it, and then B, we the shop can work with it. So if there is prototyping to be done, we want to make sure that it's something we can handle in our shop. And if it's not something that needs to be prototyped, it's something we have experience with and we think we can move you along. So an example candidate here, you have a 2-person team, you're both full-time, but you're really focused on the business and software pieces. You maybe don't have firmware engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical, and so on. Your product is maybe readily fits within the stuff that we have in our shop in terms of 3D printers, lasers, and so on. That's really just helpful for the early couple of months of the program as we're fine-tuning things, but maybe you have something that's really in our ballpark. It's been pilot tested with customers. You have your product requirements all set. You have funding available for tooling. So that's not a couple of small pockets. That's not $2,000. That's not going to get you really manufacturing scale tools, but you've got enough funding to actually get at least one part of the product moved forward. So the example here is $30K. That's reasonable for most products. And for this example product of a small plastic enclosure, $30K would get you pretty far. Your expectation is that you are going to be working at a timeline to launch in volumes throughout the course of the program. So maybe you are looking to have 200 sample parts by June. Those are production quality parts. So you've ordered the tool and you've gotten those first samples back that you can inspect. You expect your pre-orders are going to be live in May and you're going to be fulfilling initial sales in September. That would be a great timeline for the program. It gets you from an engineering prototype through pre-sales, initial sample inspection up through full revenue launch in September. So what does this look like if you were going to go through either of these pipelines? So on the advising model side, some of the things that I mentioned really make sense here is if you have a student team, you can work with our team where we've worked with a handful of different products over the years. So you would provide any documentation for us to review. You might say, I really want some design feedback. I've got questions on this manufacturing process, or this manufacturer said, actually, it needs to be this. For instance, I've had Proto Lab say, you need 3 degrees of draft in this section. And that's absurd for most parts. So it could be something like that where you've said, I had a manufacturer say X, Y, or Z, smells a little bit funny to me. What do you think? I'm happy to give you any feedback there. Maybe you're troubleshooting some root causes. You're having issues with a manufacturing error or a system error, and you want some feedback there. If we can help out, we will. We'll send you any notes pre or post, depending on what makes sense, and we can go through and review in those meetings. So that might be a 30-minute meeting. It might be a 45-minute meeting, depending on how many times we're meeting a month. Those are just some ideas of what that might look like on the technical side. I've called out the technical side here because the business side looks very similar. You'd have those biweekly meetings with a mentor. So focusing here on the technical piece and the development model, you would have that weekly meeting time set with us. We are going to set goals on a biweekly or a monthly basis and figure out what are the next steps, what makes sense, make sure we're all on the same page. You're going to provide any documentation to move things forward. We will ship things back and forth if we are still doing any prototyping. One of the things that I would ask is that if there are sample parts coming in for manufacturer, if you don't have the tools to inspect parts, send them to us. We will do some initial assembly, we'll inspect, but we will pay for shipping back and forth if we do have to work in that way with any physical components. But you would pay for all of the items themselves. We are not paying, we don't have any funding to pay for your parts, but if we do have to cover just shipping because it's a virtual program, we help with shipping out and back. We'll have those weekly updates and check-ins and then some different things that we might be helping out with. Maybe it's CAD modeling, maybe it's drawing set creation or finalization, maybe it's tweaking things as you work with a manufacturer. Maybe there's some testing when your first boards come back and anything like that. Okay. So the application process. I'd like to outline this as to how this works with the two different program options. So all applications are going to be considered for both program options. By applying, you are saying, I am interested in one of those two options that I outlined. You don't necessarily apply only to development or only to advising. You're considered for both when you apply to the program. Within 2 weeks of your application, if we are going to set up an interview, you will get an email. We will set something up with one of the folks that were on this call. You'll interview with one or two of us. On that initial interview, it'll probably be 20 minutes. And then you will first hear back about the advising model. So generally speaking, 1 to 3 weeks after your interview, depending on when you apply, you would hear back from us saying this is or isn't a fit to get into the advising model. If you are admitted to the advising model and you accept that admittance, then you will still be considered for the development model, but we make that decision last. So we look at the whole pool of people in the advising model, and then we're going to say, these are the people that are the best fit for the development model. And so you would hear about that step last. If you are new to the Rev ecosystem and you have not worked with us before, and you want to be a candidate for the development model, which again, we're considering everyone, don't be surprised if we ask for a second interview. We want to make sure that you're going to be able to work with our team and we're going to get you what you need. So we want to make sure that you would speak with myself and Lindsay and or Ken, depending on what that looks like. That's actually a good thing if you get those multiple interviews. That means that we're strongly considering you for the development model and we're trying to get you to interact with all of us. Quick note here on our facility. Again, in manufacturing, we don't expect you to be directly utilizing our facility too much because we are moving you from these low production methods to higher volume production methods. But just for context, we do have a handful of laser cutters, some desktop CNCs, a mix of 3D printers. We have WaterJet basic electronics bench with a handful of different fun tools to go with it, a PCB printer, a PCB mill, a pick and place. We do have assembly space. That's probably one of the things that we might be utilizing as we build some of your first products and do some testing on your assembly instructions and so on. And as mentioned, a variety of different technical support options here. So that is the last note from me. So the deadline to apply is November 22nd. The QR code here will take you directly to the application. It is a very short application. If you are considering applying, if the resources here sounded useful, strongly encourage you to apply because it is only about 15 minutes and then we move you to that interview potentially. And that's really the whole process. So it's a pretty straightforward process to apply. The cohort selections are finalized December 13th. And like I said, that advising model is what you'd hear about first. And so the development model teams would be set probably around that December 13th date. That's when you would know for sure. And the program kicks off January 13th virtually. All right, that is all I have now. So if there are questions, you are welcome to put them in the chat. We will field them as best we can. Otherwise, we'll stay on for a few minutes to field those questions. I'm going to leave the QR code up for just another minute in case anyone wants to scan that. Ken, Lindsay, anything to add while we're waiting for questions to come in?
No, that was pretty thorough. So I think, again, don't overthink which track you're in. We'll talk about it with you when we meet with you. Anyone who submits a reasonable application is going to get a meeting.
All right. That's all that we're going to talk about then. There aren't any questions that I am seeing at the moment, so we will keep this open just for another couple of minutes. But if anyone is running out the door, that's fine. That's all the content we're going through today. There is a question. I'm not sure. Oh, are we eligible?
We have an NSF SCR2 granted from 2 years from now. Yeah, this doesn't, I mean, it's more a matter of what state you're at. So the fact that you're getting a grant or not getting a grant doesn't change your eligibility. If you're telling us that you won't have, you won't have a sort of more or less frozen design for 2 years, then, let's chat in a couple of years. But no, I mean, there's no requirement that you do or don't have a grant. Congrats on getting the grant. But that doesn't affect eligibility at all. I think that, Hilario, it's a great question on regulatory, and that the answer is, we expect you to map out and continue to make progress. Some regulatory hurdles will take way longer than this program duration, and some hopefully can be covered. So there's the expectation is you've identified them, we'll work with you to identify them, and you're making progress towards getting there. I know for sure in the medical space, there's probably some regulatory hurdles you can't clear until you completely have things like, your GMP, good manufacturing practices nailed down, and that'll take some time.
And that's also a good note about the timeline to roll out. So like we said in that example, if you are getting sample parts, first 200, first 400 in the course of the program, you're going to need production quality parts in order to get clearances and certifications. So oftentimes that's part of the manufacturing process. If you are planning to go get those certifications in the next year, you're going to need production quality parts. So that still fits into the expectation of the program, is that you are moving to production quality manufacturing methods. Right. Doesn't look like there are any new questions.
Good.
All right, I think we are all set here.
Oops.
Looking forward to seeing your applications.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.